Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly show where I interview somebody and get to hear a little bit about their perspective on movies. And I have a special guest here who I met through, I guess, Filmstagram community, people who love to talk movies on the internet. But Lauren, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Shane. I'm Lauren. Like he said, I am also on Filmstagger under the name Succinct Cinema, and we can talk about that in a minute
Mhm.
if you want. But that is how Shane met, and that is my introduction to film on a broad scale.
Yeah. It was very interesting meeting a lot of people during COVID, especially because it's just like, well, what the heck am I going to do? Well, go talk about movies on the internet. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I got into it because I was working retail at the time, and
Mhm.
I was very fortunate that a lot of people there were movie buffs and fans, and some of them even worked in the industry. And I would always come in with new movies that I'd seen and I'd talk to them about whatever. And one day, one of them was like, please just write about this on the internet, like tell people on the internet. So I launched that blog, and they
Mhm.
were right. It's been great doing that and having that outlet and that community of like-minded individuals.
Yeah, and I especially appreciate your page because a lot of the times it's things that most people probably haven't heard of, or it's like a nice, cool way to find out about some stuff.
Well, I appreciate it because that's definitely my biggest interest is to both demystify movies and plug things that don't often get seen because that's what I'm always looking for, the next
Mhm.
big little thing.
Exactly. It's like you could go on the internet this weekend as we're recording this and find like thousands of reviews for Pinocchio, but very few people are going to be talking about something that's a nice hidden gem and also something cool to check out.
Yes.
But if you're ready, we can get started with the questions.
Let's do it. Let's see where this goes.
Well, here's everybody's either favorite or least favorite question. But Laura, what's your favorite film?
This is normally my least favorite question, but the answer is easy. It's Sidney Lumet's Network. Uh, I've probably watched it 10 to 15 times. It's the movie I recommend to everyone. And if you are around me long enough, you're going to see it. And the reason for that is that from the time it came out to now, the story hasn't really changed. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
like the same as it ever was. So it's almost comforting in a way. If I start to wonder if things are particularly bad, I realize that they're about the same as they were and they got through it. So we're going to get through it too. And I also love how realistic, even for a satire, how realistic the portrayal of media
Mhm.
and even insanity is. I think it's a great movie that everyone should watch at least once.
Absolutely. I got lucky enough. I write for Sif Pop, and they have a podcast. And earlier this year, I got to be on an episode. They have they have a episode once a month where they take on like very famous films and like decide is this really like a goat? And we got to talk about Network, and I'm like 100%,
Yes.
and still extremely relevant and uncomfortable today. And just the cast is absolutely amazing from top to bottom too.
Yeah, and I always there I can't tell you how many times I just pulled up YouTube to listen to Howard's rant. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Get big, angry, and people are going to pay attention.
Yes, and I still don't know what to tell you about inflation or the other things.
Which is funny because I have an undergrad master's of accounting and I tutor economics. And
Oh no.
it's a fun thing to chat with people, especially now.
I'm sure. But it'll go up and it'll go down. And we'll keep getting through it.
Absolutely. Alrighty. So my next question for you, Lauren, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
So this is a funny one because I have only recently learned that I have fused two memories here, because I have a very distinct memory of seeing the Pixar short Knick Knack
Uh-huh.
with the snow globes, if you're not familiar. Um, but I always thought that came in front of Toy Story, because I have a very distinct memory of seeing Toy Story. It's the first Pixar movie that I would have seen in theaters. I've
Yeah.
only recently learned that that is not the case. Knick Knack opened Finding Nemo, which I don't remember seeing. So in my mind, the perfect Pixar pairing is Knick Knack opening Toy Story. Now, I know it's not the first movie I ever saw in theaters. I know is Lion King, but I think because of the technology that was available to Toy Story, I have such a vivid memory. I'd never seen anything like that before, and certainly not on a screen like that. And so it was a pretty magical experience to see computers at the time.
Absolutely. And you have a fun thing that you could do now. You could just tell people that you saw Knick Knack in front of Toy Story and then see how much they actually know about it, if they just believe you or not.
Exactly. Like, oh yeah, that was a perfect pairing. I'm like, yeah, in my mind, in my curated mind.
Yeah, because I can't even, to be honest, I can't even name what shorts came in front of any of the Pixar movies except for one. Because I'm pretty sure the chess match was in front of Bug's Life.
That sounds correct. It's not something that I am knowledgeable on per se. I did look it up just to see eventually. But I have a vague like a vague memory as far as I know that like that I Lava You one is newer,
Yes.
you know. So I'm like, oh, okay, so it must be one of the newer ones.
I did remember seeing that one in a theater, which
Yes.
was pretty recent. A fun story. I actually saw Toy Story in a theater within the past, I think, year and a half, because they were celebrating its anniversary at the so I started going to a drive-in during COVID. I'm
Oh,
like, well,
fun.
I'm like, there's a drive-in 50 minutes from me. That's worth a drive during COVID so I can actually go see a movie.
Yes.
And God, they played Toy Story and then they played War with Grandpa.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, at least I'm gonna watch Toy Story. And then wonder why Robert De Niro, Cheech Marin, Christopher Walken, and Jane Seymour signed on to this movie. Because they all have houses.
The best thing about the drive-in too is you can, at least the one near me, is you can see what's going on and make up your own narrative for it and listen to the one you want.
Well, that's funny because we were like, I'm sitting there in the car, and on the other screen they have Harry Potter double feature, and every so often I just turn around, I'm like, I know exactly what's going on here because I've watched all these movies 50 times.
Right. I've only been to the drive-in once, but I saw whatever the newest Nightmare on Elm Street was at the time. And then I didn't like what they were pairing it with, so we just turned our heads in one direction, changed the dial, and watched Date Night.
Oh, nice.
You know? So
it's a kill shot.
You can make your own fun at the drive-in for sure.
That's a lot of fun. Now, Lauren, do you have a particular favorite genre of film?
Yes, and I actually just hinted at it. It's definitely horror. It's always been horror. That was my introduction to really what was possible with films, because my parents showed me horror movies at a very young age, which, you know, everyone's got their story of the first movie that scared them to death.
Yeah.
And mine was Nightmare on Elm Street.
There you go.
But so my mother showed that to me because she was a big horror fan growing up. And my father is not a horror fan because it's not real. He didn't like that. So he always told me it's just really good makeup and prosthetics. And so from a young age, I framed like that's what people can do with makeup and prosthetics and money. Like that is incredible. And so I really love that component of it because I think that horror invites that level of creativity. And we can get into this more if you want. My first interest in movies was from a historical context. It was actually Nazi propaganda films.
Interesting.
And we can break that down later. But what I like about horror is the portrayal of evil and how, if you go through different cultures, you can see how they value and portray evil, what their feelings of that are. I think it's a very interesting lens in that regard. And that's why I've always taken to it, because I've always taken to movies in a historical context.
That's interesting because, like, well, it's interesting on two levels because, like, if you do explore like horror films from different cultures, it is interesting to see what they do with it and compared to what you might expect. Because, like, I'm trying to think what the most recent, like, I watched House a couple months ago.
The Japanese one?
Yep.
Yes.
And it's so over the top and crazy. But
You can
like,
see our faces trying to get through, yes,
yeah, it's
houses.
it's so creepy and weird. And it's like you could feel like it was very much, it's not like an American film at all. And especially with like American horror today, which is like how many jump scares I can throw at you at this point. But I'll let you say what you're gonna say. But
Well, actually, I mean, to what you just said, I think we've entered two new ages of horror. We
yes.
have a lot of people like to call it woke cinema, and I don't love that, but we're dealing with a lot of cultural issues. Those are coming to the forefront in horror, and suddenly now I feel like we have a lot of films about mental illness
Yeah.
and what that looks like, the portrayals of that, and breakdowns of family dynamics. A lot of people love that movie, Hereditary. That's a great portrayal of the breakdown of the family.
Yes.
And I think that kind of really launched the newest age of that. But that's what's on the people's minds right now. And that's what a lot of people are grappling with, especially in a post-ish COVID world. I think you're seeing a lot of that isolation and what that did to people, what people were dealing with, wondering if the world was about to fully collapse, and not having connections to a larger landscape than their rooms or their houses. And you're seeing that shift. So I think when we're years out from that, there's going to be this very interesting time capsule that's going to form.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about horror, is it holds that in a very interesting way.
Yeah, people are going to be wondering, like, why are all these movies from around here on webcams?
Yes.
It's just like, because that's all we could do.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
and I know I've been a later in life fan of horror because I'm a big baby and I get scared
Okay.
really easily. And I remember my brother trying to make me watch like even like the 99 Mummy movie, which like is mostly action and adventure, but like it has its horror element that scared the crap out of me. Lost World Jurassic Park, that opening scene with the little girl scared the crap out of me. So like I didn't really watch those, and my brother, I realize now, is much more of like a slasher horror fan. So like I think my brother's seen every single Halloween movie like 50 times.
I tap out at like 3 of any sequel. Like, that's enough.
It's just like, how many more of these can you do? Um, but like, it's very interesting looking at horror today, especially because I feel like A24 has changed a lot of things because it's like they let people just go out there and really make whatever the hell's going on in their heads. And that's when we get Hereditary and Midsummer. And what Robert Eggers does with his very like folk horror kinds
Yeah.
of films, like The Witch and The Lighthouse and stuff like that. And then you have like more mainstream horror film, like the Conjuring franchise and stuff like that. I was a huge fan of Blumhouse until like the past couple of years. I feel like most of the stuff that they've been pumping out is just so uninspired and half-hearted.
It seems like they will try anything, which is good and bad.
Yeah.
because that is how you make interesting things. And,
Very true.
and that's great, but there's a lot of misses and you start to lose credibility sometimes. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying they have or haven't, but it's definitely something you have to be aware of. And them in particular, I know there was a period of time where they had these straight to Amazon releases.
Yes, for Halloween.
And they were okay, but it's always nice to get something new out.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
but
like,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's like I know they had like 4 of them come out in 2 weeks. I'm like, maybe if you did one of them and just really invested in that one, but like they were fine and fun, like because I feel like once you hit September, October, people start like, I want to watch some horror movies, and they're like, well, there you go.
And I think you hit on something that's, again, good and bad. Like, I guess everything is, we feel like in this age, we demand so much content all the time, always something new. And so everyone, it seems, is just pumping out as many movies as they can on
Yes.
all these different streaming services. And you just get inundated with this content. And frankly, a lot of it is just watchable and it's good for the hour and 30 minutes it's on. But I always wonder, of everything we have, what are we going to be talking about in 30 years? It feels like a lot of this stuff isn't going to survive
Yeah.
the annals of history, but who knows? Because I don't know in the 70s which movies they thought would be forgotten and that somebody's digging up on whatever the newest social media is, and they're going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, have you seen this? We're really, that's what you found?
Well, and I think that's interesting too, because it's like there's so many people out there watching so many things, talking about so many things, and just like add this to your watch list. I'm like, well, I will, which is up to like 200 movies at this point. But it's an interesting time to be a fan of cinema.
Yes, and I have promised myself that I'm not adding anything really to my watch list that's out until I finish what I have, or I've recently become more discerning about picking, because I definitely, I think it's easy to fall into this trap when you love something to feel like you need to see all of it. And that's not possible.
It is not. I can guarantee you it's not possible.
It is just mathematically impossible. And so I think you have to pick what you're really going to take something from. And as your tastes change and start to become more discerning, you figure out, you can read a description and say, no, that's not really going to be for me.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, it's good to just put something on that you're not really interested in, just to have it on in the background. I think that's completely fine. And it's okay to turn things off. If you're not feeling it, you can just turn it off. There's plenty more
Yeah.
to try to watch.
It's funny because my last thing I'll say before we move on to the next question is just so many people like, and they find out a movie I haven't seen, and they're like, you haven't seen this? You see everything. I'm like, you literally can't see
Yes,
everything. I'm
it's
like,
true.
I've seen this many films this year, and there's even more than that I haven't, because that's just how much content comes out now. It's insane.
Yes.
But somehow none of them are out in theaters.
Isn't it the darndest thing?
Because it's like, I swear, the theaters are so mad at Disney. They're like, we need movies in theaters. Nope, Pinocchio and Hocus Pocus just dropping on Disney Plus, and like AMC's just like, we need money.
Yeah, well, in Cineworld now too, Regal.
Yeah.
They just filed for bankruptcy. But that's an unfortunate thing that I don't particularly understand a lot about, is I like to see what's out in theaters just to keep abreast of what's new. And I've seen the same movies out for weeks, even though I know from the calendar there's a bunch of stuff out. So I don't understand how film distribution works. It's something I'd like to learn more about as far as who gets that theater space. But kudos to Top Gun Maverick for still being in theaters. That's truly, in this day and age, a record.
Yeah. Tom Cruise is just like, I'm not putting this on a streaming service. Paramount's like, we're glad we listened to you, as they're counting their billions of dollars.
Exactly. I think, what is it, the 5th highest grossing movie now?
Yep.
It
And
still has time to grow.
yeah. Now, Lauren, Do you have any particular favorite filmmakers?
So that changes all the time as I'm exploring. I'd say right now I'm particularly fond of Robert Altman.
Okay.
I'm going through his movies right now, and I'm making a point to watch all of those because he did not make so many. I can watch all of them. But what I'm enjoying the most about him is his movies. I compare to watching an orchestra because he's got so many extras, so much going on in every frame, and they're all moving in such a way that you can take in the whole scene at once and it's going to blend and make sense, or you can just start paying attention to little pieces and you see that there's so much minute action going on. And it's really incredible to see his control of space. So I was trying to think if I have a favorite Robert Altman right now, and I don't think I do. The last one I saw was Brewster McCloud. I think a lot of people miss that one with a younger Shelley Duvall, but it's a fun little movie. It's definitely unique.
I'm trying to think. So, like, I pull up IMDb because
Oh,
everybody's
yeah, can
greatest
we do that? Is that cheating?
everybody's greatest resource. But like I've seen Nashville, and I'm particularly a big fan of Gosford Park.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
It's what's interesting. It's written by the same writer of Downton Abbey, and except like it's a murder mystery, but like it has a ridiculous amount of people in this movie, like a lot of Robert Altman films. Because I remember seeing it for the first time back in the early days of DVDs when they had like mail-in DVD clubs.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it happened to be the DVD of the month that we received. And like this is back when I was like 10 or 11. So like I wasn't appreciating this very British murder mystery as like an 11-year-old. But like rewatching it again, I'm like, I recognize like 99% of the people in this movie, and these are ridiculous casts. And I really appreciate the way that you put it, like this is an orchestra. It's like really is. That's feel like that's the only way you're gonna conduct this movie together is with all these moving pieces.
And I can't believe I just lied to your viewers and completely, I guess, on the spot forgot that he did The Player, which is a fantastic. If you're a movie fan,
Mm,
it almost has to be your favorite Robert Altman, I feel like. It's just such a great criticism,
mhm.
uh, a scathing review of the film industry as a whole.
It's always interesting seeing a really good film about film.
Yes.
And especially like if you love film so much, it's always cool to get like that behind the scenes kind of thing with it. Now, talking a little bit about in front of the camera, who are some of your favorite actors, actresses?
So a really funny thing about me is that actors and actresses are something that I know very little about. And for as
Mhm.
many as I've seen, I could see somebody in the same five films and I just wouldn't. Goes right over my head. But I do know that I really like Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
Um, one because I'll just watch anything that she's in. She's got a great screen presence
Hmm.
and I value that. But what I truly like most about her is that she loves elevating smaller films. So she intentionally makes a lot of choices, like that movie Destroyer.
Yes.
Yes. Movies like that where she believes in the story, she believes in what she's doing, and she wants people to see these things. And I think that's such a great quality to use your star power
Hmm.
to elevate others. So big fan of her, and I guess along the same vein, Willem Dafoe.
Yep.
I think whatever he does, he does such an interesting spin on, it, and he picks really interesting movies as well.
It's very true. And it's funny getting to see Nicole Kidman every time I go to AMC.
That's maybe her greatest work.
And apparently it's getting a sequel.
I've heard.
It's just like, as somebody who goes to AMC a lot, and you're just like, oh, we got through our 30 minutes of trailers, let's go. And then it's just like, oh no, I forgot.
Here
Nicole
she
Kidman
comes.
comes on. And it just, yeah, I know the internet has kind of rebelled against that ad a lot. But my thoughts are like, just make a couple of them and rotate them. But anyway, Nicole Kidman's a great actress, and I did drive 55 minutes to a theater to go see Destroyer because that was the only one showing it in New Jersey. And I'm like, I'm gonna see this. That was an uncomfortable watch, but she was so fantastic in it.
It was, and even being in there, I couldn't believe that it was her.
Yeah,
I was like, am I sure she's in this? Is this definitely her? And I know there's a great story about how she was in the street in that makeup, and people were being pretty rude to her
interesting.
in character. Yeah, I think somebody like slammed a door in her face or something. You can look it up and get the actual story, but kudos to them because they
Yeah.
completely transformed her for that.
And I feel like Willem Dafoe is one of the most beloved actors because you have like cinephiles that love just the wide variety of roles that he's done, films, you know, from things like The Lighthouse
Yes.
and to like really going to like Antichrist and stuff like that. And then all of like the comic book fans who are like, this is my Green Goblin, will always be my Green Goblin, and memes. And it's so interesting because he gets a lot of love and he deserves it. He's such a fantastic actor.
Yes, and before I even really got into films, I saw all the Spider-Mans when they came out when I was
Yeah.
a kid, and what a great villain he was. And then to see the range there. And I mean, really, kudos to Marvel on this. They get a lot of really incredible actors in
Yeah.
their films, and you see them, and you're like, what are you doing here? Like, what? Like, you're all here.
It's like, why is Glenn Close playing a leader of an alien race on some random planet somewhere? Uh,
Yes.
or, but like, that's because sometimes they get wasted. But boy, did Sam Raimi let Willem Dafoe go all in. Even like the couple of minutes he pops up in the second one as like a vision to his son, it's just like, Harry, avenge me. And,
Well, truly, I only recently watched some Marvel movies, and it was
uh,
wholly because I knew that Sam Raimi was going to be directing one, and I
yeah,
was so moved by what he did with Green Goblin,
yep,
and it was a Doc Ock.
yes, Alfred
Yeah,
Molina.
like so I ended up watching them all, so I would understand what was going on in that movie. But yeah, Sam Raimi definitely brought out the best of everyone
Yeah.
in those films.
Oh, that made me so because like when I found out Scott Derrickson had pulled out of Multiverse of Madness, I'm like, oh, that's disappointing because like he's a really talented director. And then I heard Sam Raimi was going to direct. I'm like, what?
Yes, even
Because like
better.
I'm a huge like I love the Spider-Man film, but like I'm a huge fan of Evil Dead, Drag Me to Hell. I even I even really enjoy The Quick and the Dead,
I
um,
haven't seen it.
which is such a it's like, can you imagine a Western except every Sam Raimi trick in the book, most obnoxious like camera angles and stuff like that. But oh, I was so happy when I found out Sam Raimi was going to do Multiverse of Madness, and I really enjoyed it a lot.
I did too. It was a fun movie.
Yeah, it's an odd time because like I'm going to be perfectly honest, like I'm a humongous fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's an odd time to be a fan. A lot of angry people right now, and I'm just like, everybody needs to calm down.
I don't there's so much to unpack there. People are angry about who gets cast for
Yeah,
things and what, and but comics, I came into them late, but I was always aware of them. There's always been a subversive genre. They've I think they had Superman fighting the KKK one time. Um
it's that's the thing. It's
even
like there's 50 million versions of all kinds of different weird things that they do in comics. They're like, just another one. Just let it go.
but it's always been intended to be a radical medium. And
Mhm.
so it's not off base and out of the realm of possibility that people who don't normally get the stage would get it in a
Yeah.
comic book universe. That's the fun of it. And some of those movies, they are fun. It's entertaining when, sometimes people do want to go to an amusement park. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can just turn it off if you don't like it.
Well, that's you brought up a very interesting idea there. Don't watch it if you don't want to.
I know it's a novel concept. It's something I had to learn, but you can just not watch something. There's plenty more for you to watch.
Trust me, there's hundreds of movies that come out every year, borderline thousands. Just, there's tons of them. You just pick whatever you want to watch.
Anything you want.
Now, Lauren, is there a particular film that you feel like you could just go back to and watch like literally any day?
So it's not because it's good.
Okay.
And I own this and I know it, but I do also own this movie, the Stephen King adaptation of Children of the Corn. Okay. For whatever reason, I just really enjoy the schlockiness of that. I don't have to fully pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. And I often find myself in public yelling in my head, Outlander. For reasons unknown to me, but it's a quality of who I am. So I watch that movie often. I will turn it on sometimes just in the background, because it doesn't consume my time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would my vote would be for Children of the Corn. Just the first one.
I imagine, like, I just hear like the little creepy kid just be like, Malachi.
Another one.
I've definitely, because like I'm a big reader too, and I've definitely gone headlong into Stephen King's writing probably the past year or two. And Stephen King's able to elevate a lot of things because he brings a lot to some absolutely ridiculous stories and ideas, but not everybody who adapts them are able to elevate them. And sometimes they come off being like schlocky, what you expect it to potentially be.
Well, I think in everyone's defense, and I have read a lot of Stephen King books, and I do enjoy them, but if Stephen King is terrible at anything, it is finishing a book. A lot of them, for me, just fall off a cliff at the end. And I think that makes it harder on people who are trying to create the film version. And I also think, with writing in general, there's a lot of ideas you can convey that don't translate well to film.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big thing too.
But I know we're going to keep trying with Stephen King.
Yes.
If they bless him for that.
If they could just plaster Stephen King on it, people are like, oh, I know who that is.
I think there's at least, 4 more in the works right now, and probably a few reboots.
Like, I'm pretty interested in the Salem's Lot adaptation that they have coming out. Firestarter, I'm like sitting there watching and I'm like, this is John Carpenter. And I'm just sitting there listening to the score. I'm like, oh, this score deserves a better movie.
I swore I was gonna, because they did that remake, I guess last year now, maybe, or this year, I'm not sure anymore. Yeah. And I never seen the original either, and I was like, I swear I'm gonna watch the first one, and then I'm gonna watch the new one, and I still haven't seen either of them.
Yeah,
because I haven't heard anything good about either of them.
I would recommend, if you like listening to scores, listen to the score for the new one, but I wouldn't watch the movie.
I'll pull it up on Spotify.
Because it sounds like a John Carpenter score, but like I enjoy John Carpenter's score, so I'm just sitting there like I even sat through the credits at the end, just listening. I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying this a lot more than the movie I just watched.
Oh no!
But I have to give credit. If I was going to make a Stephen King adaptation, I'm hiring Frank Darabont to direct it, because the 3 that I know that he's directed turned out pretty well to me. So
the only one I'm waiting for, my favorite Stephen King book, probably, is it called Dementia? That doesn't sound right, but it's the two older people. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't think that I do. He
I'm
has
looking.
written a lot of things, so I haven't read all of them. Um,
Oh, it's Insomnia.
Interesting.
Insomnia, not
Not to be
dementia.
confused with the Scandinavian film turned Christopher Nolan film.
Yes, no. But if you haven't read that, it's a very good book, and what I've often thought is that maybe it can't be adapted into a film, and so in that regard, I'm glad no one's tried.
Yeah, I just read Dreamcatcher and I'm like, how did they even attempt to make this into a movie? And from what I understand, it didn't go well.
The movie is it's rough. It's a rough one for sure. I've never read it, but I definitely saw it.
Well, and I just finished watching the what was CBS All Access turned Paramount Plus miniseries, The Stand. And I'm
Okay.
like, there's a lot going on here, but also the book's like 1,200 pages unabridged.
And that's a fantastic book. That's
Mhm.
was my the first one I read by him. Yes, it's a beast. It's a beast, but it holds up. And then you have that original miniseries, which is rough, but it's charming.
I
You
felt
know,
like I was watching the newer one, and I'm like, anytime Randall Flagg's not on screen, I don't feel like I care about the show. And I feel like that's not a good thing sitting here 9 hours watching this.
no, I guess that's why it started on CBS All Access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which has grown into Paramount Plus, but like, yeah, it's tough to, it's tough to adapt a lot of things into film. And that's a big undertaking. It's just, they're never going to stop trying to adapt Stephen King. So,
No, no, they will not. They will not. And I agree. There's only been a few that are really great. And I think funny enough, one of the probably the most famous one is The Shining, and he famously hates that adaptation.
which like I've read The Shining and I've watched the movie. I love them both. But yeah, Stanley Kubrick was not the kind of person to be like, I'm gonna faithfully adapt this thing. It's just like, this seems like a cool idea. I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want with it.
Yes, and you're right. They're both phenomenal tellings in their own way. And I like that you didn't when I read the book, I didn't feel like I knew everything that was going to happen because I'd seen the movie so many times before ever reading the book.
Mhm.
But and then I know that there's a more faithful adaptation, but I've never seen it because I heard it's not good.
Yeah, so they didn't have Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
So that's your first problem. Now, Lauren, what's a film that connects to you more closely because it relates to another interest of yours?
It almost feels like cheating that this movie should even exist for this question. But so before I ever got into movies, I grew up
Mhm.
in a big music house.
Okay.
And the way that I am about movies now, it was about music, and I was going to concerts from a very young age. My father, when he was a teenager, would make money on the side taking photos at big concerts, and so he passed that on to me, and that was always a big part of my life. And so he introduced me to the Talking Heads,
Okay.
who have always been one of my favorite bands, and David Byrne is such a big influence of
Mhm.
mine. So obviously his movie True Stories is like a dream come true to me that it even exists, and there's a phenomenal soundtrack with it, and there's a coffee table book, and it's also just a great small town weird telling of vignettes. It's
Yeah.
like vignettes of events. I think it's the only way I could explain it. But I was so happy the first time I saw that film because it fused everything I love
Mhm.
to a handy little package.
And that's so interesting because he's such a dynamic artist. And like I haven't checked it out, but I have wanted to check out it's Utopia, right? That he created, which I guess is like, is it a film? Is it a performance art piece? I don't
So
know.
you're talking about? Are you talking about the Broadway American Utopia
I
that
guess.
is now a film?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I've actually been fortunate enough to see that on Broadway.
Okay.
And it is it is a concert
Yeah.
with a lot of dynamic pieces. You'll notice that dynamic things are something I really enjoy. And then
Yeah.
Spike Lee, who's a big uh, influence of mine too, he created a film version of it, which holds the performance together, but then adds some cultural components, which I think are still true to David Byrne's vision. So they're both wonderful, seeing the show and seeing the film. He's got a lot of stuff like that. And another theme of mine, you'll see, something I really like about David Byrne is that he's also always elevating artists.
Hmm.
So he's got something called Contemporary Colors, which is a performance piece. A bunch of artists got together to do the music, and it's a flag twirling competition. So it's an interesting piece of art. If you like that kind of stuff, it's worth checking out. And then, of course, Stop Making Sense is rightfully one of the most famous concert videos.
Hmm. So those are a lot of things for me to add to my watch list, as we were just discussing earlier, that's ever
Yeah.
growing. Now, do you have a particular movie character that you feel like you connect with on a personal level?
Yeah, it's pretty dark. I'm gonna be honest. I've had a very colorful life, and it's actually only recently when I got into Marvel that I was introduced to Wanda Maximoff.
Okay.
And I've been through a lot of periods of grief and situations that were not in my control. So
Mhm.
I think that Wanda's actions and the portrayal of Wanda, especially in WandaVision, really put on screen some things that I dealt with and navigated. And obviously, I didn't set the world on fire because I didn't have that power. But I will be honest, I definitely set myself on fire metaphorically for a long period of time. And so I really appreciate where I am now, seeing the portrayal of grief
Mhm.
and the loss of control and the battle within that Wanda deals with. And I know that, people feel however they feel, but I think that it's a really great portrayal of those things.
I appreciate you being that candid about it and honest about it. And I find it very interesting where that character has gone. Because, like, to be honest, like her twin brother just pop up in Age of Ultron is like, hey, look,
Yes.
they're not mutants because we can't say that word. But they've gone so in such an interesting direction with her and dealing with, because like, and the internet wants to make it a contest about like who's gone through the worst things, and but like she's been through a lot, and I think WandaVision and then leading into like Multiverse of Madness, it's quite interesting, and like Elizabeth Olsen kills it.
She's a monster. Really, truly, the way she owns that character is commendable.
Mhm.
And I think she's really carrying the universe on her back right now.
Yeah,
Same way Robert
and
Downey Jr. did.
yeah, and I'm automatically excited to find out what she's in next because I want to
Yes.
see more of that. And WandaVision probably is one of the boldest things that they've done and most interesting and different. And that was such a great piece for her. And yeah, deals with a lot of grief and processing and going a lot deeper emotionally than a lot of the other Marvel films. And people bring up like Thor's also been through a lot of things, and it's interesting because he's going in a completely different direction now because he's kind of a clown. Um, but like, but like you see what Elizabeth Olsen portrays on screen is really powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's good to deal with things with humor, and that's
Yeah.
something that Taika deals with a lot. And all like Jojo Rabbit is very funny
Yes,
for being
devastating.
so dark. Yes, just one way to handle things, and that's fine. And I think with Wanda in particular, there's also this component just of being female and maybe how we see females and how we see emotional females
Hmm.
or portrayals of them. So I think in that regard, I can just relate to her more than Thor. But no, the Thor movies are hysterical.
Yeah. I and I know a lot of people have strong feelings about like because obviously you're able to connect in that way with Wanda as a character. A lot of people got mad about how they treated Thor in Endgame, but not gonna lie, I kind of related to that because sometimes when I'm upset, it's just like I find that bottom of a bowl of food, and sometimes you wind up in a certain place like that, and the whole fat Thor thing. I'm like, you know, sometimes it just happens that way. And he didn't really have a whole lot of purpose for 5 years. And sometimes you like just knowing how my experience through COVID went, I'm like, I can feel that. I just need to got back into God bod mode. Or
There you go.
just like at least trim mode because no, I don't want to be the size of Chris Hemsworth. I don't want to put in that much effort, nor does he, apparently.
Well, he has a lot of help when he's doing it, so it's almost.
If that was my job and I could just spend my whole day doing that, that's a different story. But it's very interesting, and definitely Elizabeth Olsen's one of the biggest breakout stars now from these films, which is so interesting thinking about that she's the younger sister of Mary Kate and Ashley.
Right, and good for her for making her own way.
Yep. And they're just sitting there being well, they're hundreds of millions of dollars that they have because they're like fashion icons at this point. So good for them.
Yeah, everybody's thriving.
Yeah. Now, Lauren, what's a film that you love that you think would surprise people?
Okay, I had to ask somebody, a friend of
Okay.
mine, and I was like, which what surprises you that I like? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, what about the movie Selena? Did you think that's surprising? And he's like, what do you mean you like the movie Selena? I said, I love the movie Selena. He said, that's definitely the winner. So here we are. Uh, it's definitely the movie Selena. I was actually just rewatching a little bit of it the other day, to make sure that was my answer. But I have back in the day, VH1 used to play all of the pop-up videos and
Yeah.
behind the music and these music films. And they would play Selena a lot. And my TV was always set to VH1. I
Mhm.
have a lot of fond memories of watching Selena at any part that it was on. And Jennifer Lopez, such a phenomenal actress
Yeah.
who her career really could have gone in either direction. I think she could have had anything she wanted. It's great that she really just kind of has both.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of her work and her movies. Um, I love the portrayal of navigating as a Mexican American celebrity, and obviously the film and the story are very sad and they get dark, but there's a wholesome, almost telenovela quality to the film as well, which I find very charming.
I haven't seen the film, but what's interesting is I just finished watching the Netflix series that they
Okay.
made. I really like the actress who played Selena, but I wasn't like the hugest fan of the series. And I think a lot of people were upset because they spent a ridiculous amount of time not even focusing on her. Like it's like her siblings and her parents. I'm just like, this is an interesting choice. Who made this series? It was her family. But like I've heard because like obviously Jennifer Lopez's acting career started somewhere and it blew up with that. And all these years later, the fact that she could have easily been nominated for an Oscar for Hustlers and wasn't,
Yes.
which she blew me away in that. I thought that she would have deserved a nomination if she got one. And she's killing it. She's 50, she's doing whatever she wants and seems to be enjoying her life doing it. And that's
Yes,
awesome.
and if
Inspiring.
you haven't seen Marry Me, because I think a lot of people didn't,
Uh,
they very quickly dismissed it. Such a fun movie. I was smiling the whole time. It's
yeah.
great return to rom-coms. I'm glad we're going back to that right now because we need that little zest in our lives
Yeah.
sometimes.
And not like as somebody who's not the hugest fan of rom-coms, Like I thought it was a nice little film, and like Jennifer Lopez is great. Owen Wilson's just like, Owen Wilson.
Yes.
And just he looks like he would be a dad that would be really awkward in this situation and just kind of going along with it. And it's fun. And if I see her pop up in more things, it's like she's a really talented performer, both music. Like I watched her that documentary they made Halftime
Yes.
that came out. I'm like, I really enjoyed watching that. And not gonna lie, her and Shakira had one of the best halftime shows in a long time for the Super Bowl. And still think it's funny that a bunch of parents got upset. It's like kids watch this. I'm like, you're letting your kids watch a bunch of grown men beat the crap out of each other, and then you have a problem with this.
Well, and I promise you, at this point, if your kids have a phone, they've seen much worse.
Yes. Also, good point. So there you go. But I do like, especially after I just finished the series, now I am very interested in actually checking out the film. So I will have to let you know once I actually check it out.
Yes, well, shameless plug, and not really because I don't work for HBO, but it is on HBO Max right now.
Okay.
So for your US listeners, you can
while
find
it's
it there.
while it's
While
still
it's still
functioning
there.
and has things on there. Oh, that's a whole other conversation. But Lauren, my last question for you is, what do you love most about movies?
Oh boy.
See, this is the real tough question.
So I guess we'll backtrack to a cliffhanger from earlier. When I got into film, um, when I was doing a history assignment in school, and in my school we had to do a assignment on the Holocaust every year.
Mhm.
And being Jewish, which I am, I was very familiar with the Holocaust, and I was tired of writing about concentration camp every year because that's kind of what they recommended. So I started reading more, and I learned about these propaganda films, and I became very interested in this tool of power that could do so much to control a narrative
Mhm.
and influence so many people. And that was my introduction to film, really. A component of film, I should say, because I did grow up watching, Disney movies and whatnot.
Yeah.
But when you dig into it, film is such a powerful medium because it activates almost all of the senses. And it's interesting to see something go from script to feature and see how people saw the words and what that would look like on a broader scale.
Mhm.
But then to also be able to control how you will see that image based on the sounds, the colors, the overall tone. It's going to influence you. A movie, if you mute a movie and listen and watch it, is much different experience from listening to it. And I think that's a very fascinating thing, how much you can do with the medium. Like we were even talking about, with Stephen King adaptations, not everything is going to translate well or the same. I've read so many books and I see them on screen, and I never thought of it that way, because we're going to think about things the way with the tools that we have. So when you go into if you were reading a historical text, if you don't know what the world looked like at that time, you're going to picture it with the things that and it's going to be an oddly modern take on events. So it's really nice to be able to actually see older movies, especially in movies from other countries that you're not familiar with, and see what houses look like there, how they decorate, what color schemes they use, what the technology is like at every point, it's such a phenomenal time capsule that nothing else can do what movies can in that regard.
I loved your answer. And it brought up a lot of thoughts, and like I think that's one of the things I appreciate most about movies is being able to really dive into other people's cultures too, because there's filmmakers that make films about other cultures, but then there's people from another culture who makes a film about another culture,
Yes.
and there's a very big difference. And we're limited by our own experiences, we're limited by our own background. So like I, as like an Italian American from New Jersey trying to make a film about like feudal Japan is not going to be the same thing as Akira Kurosawa making a film about feudal Japan.
Right.
And it's like I have first an Americanized perspective of what that's going to be. I have absolutely no frame of reference except for watching films about those kinds of things. And it's very interesting because you can see filmmakers making films about another culture based off of films that they've seen from a culture. And then at that point, you're just having like these layers of
Right.
filters throughout everything. And I think it's really cool. And like, that's why I try to go out of my way to watch a lot of foreign language films too. And even just films from other countries. Cause like, you know, I don't know why this popped in my head as an example, but like you watch Mary Poppins, and like to a bunch of Americans, Dick Van Dyke's great. And it's like, oh, that doesn't sound too weird. That sounds like a British person. All British people are just like,
Yes.
just like, what the hell are you talking about? And it's also interesting to see, and maybe he's fresh on my mind because like I love Martin McDonagh, and he has a new film coming out. But it's so interesting seeing him make something like In Bruges, which feels very Irish, but like him making films about America, it's also very interesting from like the outside looking in. Like Three Billboards is such an interesting watch as an American, watching somebody's perspective who isn't from here and being like, gets it though. And they're a little bit more critical because they're like, from the outside looking in, this is nuts. And I'm like, well, honestly, from the inside looking in, it's nuts too, depending on who you are. But I think that's really interesting. And I appreciate your answer, in short.
Thank you.
But how I always like to wrap this show up is I let my guest ask me a question. So, what would you like to ask the Wasteland Reviewer?
Well, something that's very important to me in general is making sure other people have the tools to elevate themselves and really promoting positivity in that regard. So I would ask you, for somebody who wants to pursue really anything, what is your advice? How did you make that leap? How did you find the courage to start chasing the things that you wanted? If maybe not the things that you thought were so possible to obtain.
It's a very interesting question, and I'm going to come at it from a couple different directions. But I think the first one is so, like I mentioned earlier during this interview, is like I have an undergrad and master's of accounting. So like going into college, I'm like I'm going to be an accountant, and probably like halfway through my junior year of college, I'm like I don't know if this is what I really want. But as you see, I went all the way through and got two full degrees in it, which, to be honest, having an accounting degree opens up a lot of doors for you in a lot of different ways. So, like, it's even paying off now because, like, I work at a university full time, but, like, I got made budget manager of my department and multiple departments. Like, well, that's what having a master's in accounting gets me. I get to be the money man and tell people, no, you don't have money to do that. Um, but I remember because like I had been working as a tutor since I was 19, my sophomore year of college. I've been working in my department since I was 19 years old. And I remember sitting there with going into my fourth semester of grad school because I took my time. I only took two classes because they were paying for two classes. I was in no hurry and I didn't need to pay
Right.
for grad school. Um, and our assistant director left. And I'm sitting there like, why not? Like in my head, I'm like, why not try it out? Even some of my friends are like, you're not qualified for that. Why would you apply for it? I'm like, well, thanks. That was my reaction. I'm like, what's the worst they can do? Say no.
Right.
And like, if I really was unqualified, then I would expect a no. But if they said yes, that's exciting. So really, I tell all of my college students if you have an opportunity that arises and you feel like legitimately think about it, if you can handle it, don't say no to it. That's how I actually became a college instructor too, because an adjunct math instructor quit 2.5 weeks into a semester. And I was really close with the math chair because we offered all the tutoring, and she was freaking out. I'm like, I'll do it. And she's like, Are you serious? I'm like, I'm dead serious. And that was the first time I ever taught a college class. And now, 5 years later, I teach every semester at Rider University, and I love it. And I'd like to think the students enjoy my class. They keep signing up. It's like students seem to find their way into it, so I feel like I'm doing something right. But the thing is, it's like I had those opportunities, and I guess to kind of frame it in terms of this context, because it's like I started my YouTube channel in like July 2016. And it's interesting because I had broken up with my now wife because we were together for over 2.5 years, broke up for 3 years, and got back together. And now the rest is history. But we broke up, and I'm like, I feel like I need to do some things that are very me right now. And I started a Facebook page and I was reviewing movies. I remember the first movie I wrote something up was The Big Short and like The Revenant. And I started doing that. And then I started realizing, like, but what if I just recorded myself talking about this? This would be a lot less trying to put this all together. And then that's what I did. I started just recording myself on my webcam. If you watch some of my early videos, they look like crap. But here's the thing. I have a full-time job and I teach on top of that. This is definitely not my priority. So like people are shocked how much I actually put into this, but like, I do my best and I just kind of went with it. And there's plenty of times I almost gave up on my YouTube channel because it took me over 3 years to even crack 100 subscribers. Um, and I just kept with it. And I met some people on Instagram that were editors of websites or on Twitter, and they're like, "Hey, would you be interested in writing?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And then that's how I got here. And I do all these things, and I'm like, sometimes it's a lot. And the past couple weeks, I took a break from doing a lot of writing and stuff like that because, like, it's the beginning of the college school year and stuff like that. I just needed one. But I think the moral of the story is if you really want to try to dive into something, if an opportunity arises, don't say no to it because life's not going to be that kind to you very often. And if you do have an opportunity, you see an opening, go for it. And also, sometimes life isn't that nice to you. And sometimes you might have to make your own
Yeah.
and try to find some way to wedge in somewhere. And, it takes persistence if you're going to do it that way. Because, like, when I started this YouTube channel, I had no connections, I had no, like, real practice with this. And it took me years of honestly, of just going through it. And now I'm where I am now. And now I get to do all these things and meet new people and have awesome experiences. And I love it. So there we go. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And I have to comment in my own way. It's very funny that one of the catalysts for me really getting into the film career I have now was the breakup. So I think there might be something there.
Yeah. If love breaks your heart, then go do something that's going to make you happy.
You
Because,
can become an artist.
yes, isn't that what all the best art is? Broken-hearted people. Um, but Lauren, I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I do give everybody one last chance if you want to plug anything for the audience before we wrap up.
Well, thank you for having me, Shane, and I hope that you did have some fun. I had fun.
Oh, I definitely did. So,
The only thing that I want to plug is the Instagram page. It is Succinct Cinema. And like you were saying, my focus is really on independent films and the lesser known, more hidden gems. And the most important thing to me and what that succinct means in the title is that my intention is to get people excited about movies and watching movies. It's not to use a lot of industry heavy language and make movies intimidating, because I think that a lot of movies, especially more of the acclaimed ones, they feel like there's a barrier to entry, and there's just not. So I try to do my best to make sure that people are just out there watching stuff and sifting through all of the content that is available.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.